Dolores Johnson.
Here.
Kirk Martin.
Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Okay. This is the time for public comment, and any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within our jurisdiction that is not scheduled for them the same day. We have 15 minutes, and I have one speaker slip from Angelo Salvucci.
Perfect. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Angelo Salvucci. I'm one of the occupants of one of the hangars at Atlantic that perhaps you'll be discussing later in the agenda. Our hangar is one of the hangars that has been scheduled to be moved off the Atlantic site. I want to actually thank Roger for the early notification in the process that will need to be done, and I especially wanted to thank Hazel for working with us to identify a new location. Our hangar's been there for a long, long time, and this is a short notice to get it done, and I appreciate everyone's efforts to assist us in finding a new home for our hangar. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I have another speaker slip from Ron Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the time. I'm speaking on the same issue. We had a really nice meeting last night at the Airport Advocates group, and which I think we achieved a lot of constructive organization in coordinating this issue. The primary concern, to bring the members of the Airport Commission up to date very briefly, is that as the new terminal space is being acquired by the city, it takes away about 40 or 50,000 square feet of existing space currently under lease by Atlantic, and that's where the hangars, 19 current hangar tenants, actually these are 4 vacant, so we have 15 current hangar tenants reside. And unfortunately, to date, we still don't have, we received notice about 2.5 weeks ago, and unfortunately, to date, we still don't have a definitive answer as to what's going to happen to those hangars and the tenants that occupy those hangars. And I would like to encourage the Airport Commission to get behind our effort to either preserve the hangars, number one, by either relocating them on the Atlantic ramp, and if Atlantic doesn't feel that they can accommodate the 19 existing hangars, that we have made discussions with Signature, the other FBO, of course, to accommodate a certain number of hangars on their property, and they can take between 5 to possibly up to 8 hangars on their property. And I would prefer that to happen rather than to have the hangars scrapped and destroyed or moved to another airport, which all of those options have been considerations that have been expressed to me by Roger Ron-Pierre. And I'd like to encourage the Airport Commission to get behind saving those hangars one way or the other. I know there's a way to do it if we can just get some ground rules established and get some determination from Atlantic on exactly what they're going to do with how many hangars they're going to do it with. And I'm not sure the influence level that you people may have, other than the fact that you can certainly get behind this in every way possible through the administration to get some answers. Our deadline is less than, or just at 2 weeks away. And like I said, we've been working on this for 2.5 weeks, and we are nowhere at this point in time that I understand. And so hopefully we can get some very definitive, accurate answers so we know exactly what will happen to that tenancy. Thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Is it scheduled to come before us?
No, not at this point.
Well, I believe we'll be getting more information in the director's report on that.
Well, Madam Chair, when we talk about the Atlantic lease, we'll have some diagrams of the lease space so we can describe kind of what the latest information is. Hazel has some more up-to-date information than what we had last night.
Okay, good. We'll move on then to the notices that on Thursday, May 15th at 3 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted the agenda on the bulletin board, and that the General Aviation Subcommittee met on Tuesday, May 13th. The Public Relations Subcommittee met on Wednesday, May 14th, and the Lease Review Subcommittee met on Thursday, May 15th in the Airport Administration Building. And then finally, we had that the Noise Abatement Committee will meet Wednesday, June 25th in the Airport Administration Building. Which brings us to the consent calendar. Do I have any requests to take any of those issues separately? Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that the consent calendar be approved. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll move on then. And the next thing we have is administrative reports.
Okay, our first one is an Air Service Development Market Study. If you recall, some months ago, we contracted with Trans-Systems, Inc. to do a passenger survey and then a air service development study to kind of evaluate what our leakage was, what our the status of our current air service, and where we might have some holes that would be nice to fill, or current service that would be in our best interest to try and maintain or improve. Kevin Shore is here from Trans-Systems to make a presentation to you on the results of the study.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. In the next 15-20 minutes, I'll give you an overview of the results of the passenger survey and the air service study that we performed for the airport. Starting with the passenger survey, 636 passengers were surveyed between September 10th and 17th of last year. The demographics look as you see here. About 51% of these passengers were male, 49% were female, somewhat similar to the demographic in the 2005 survey. I think the male passengers have lost their share of the survey respondents by about 3%, so it's still fairly similar. 27% of the passengers under 35, 39% 35 to 54, 34% 55 and above. And the interesting thing to note, again, compared to the survey 2 years ago, about 4% more of the share of respondents are under 35%, 4% more or 55 and over. So there are slightly less respondents in the 35 to 54 category. Of the people that were surveyed, 45% said they were business travelers, 21% said they were frequent Santa Barbara travelers, which means they fly 6 or more times a year. So we wanted to find out where these passengers were from, where they lived. We found out that 48% were Santa Barbara County residents, 2% from Ventura County, 1% from San Luis Obispo County. So about 51% of the passengers surveyed were from the Tri-County area. Total in-state passengers were about 61%. Then the rest, 36%, were domestic outside of California, 3% resided internationally. So we wanted to find out where these passengers were going to. 21% were traveling within California, another 30% within the western United States other than California. So a little more than half of the passengers surveyed were traveling within the western United States, another 25% to the east, and so on and so forth. We wanted to find out why these passengers choose Santa Barbara, why do they choose Los Angeles when they do, and why do they choose Burbank when they do. Not surprisingly, 64% said they choose Santa Barbara because it is the most convenient airport. Another 21% said they chose Santa Barbara because it was their destination. Only 7% choose Santa Barbara because of the schedules offered by the airlines, 4% because of the airline preference, and 4% because of the fares offered here. Not surprisingly, about 24% of these passengers said they fly out of LA because of better schedules. 28% said they fly out of there because of better fares. Analogously, Burbank, we saw similar numbers. 24% fly out of Burbank for the better schedules. 32% for better fares. So I think these were trends that we saw in the 2005 survey, somewhat similar in the 2007 survey. I think we'll show you some numbers from the leakage analysis that we did that'll further corroborate some of the things that we've discovered in the passenger survey as well. On a scale of 10, 47% gave the airport a 9 or 10 for its cleanliness and appearance of the facility. About 48% gave the airport a 9 or 10 due to their overall personal satisfaction with using it. And about 63% said it was definitely more desirable compared to flying out of LAX. Based on the value provided to the Santa Barbara frequent travelers, about 75% said on a scale of 10, they gave a 9 to 10 of the airport's convenience to their home. 65% said they value the small, intimate feel of the facility, and so on and so forth. Customer feedback. I don't think you'll be at all surprised. We did get a myriad of comments from passengers. Again, we'll talk about a few here, but some passengers even requesting service to destinations that the airport currently has service to. So it was a bit of a challenge to go through all of the comments and pick out what was important and what was valid. But not surprisingly, about 16% said they did enjoy the airport's size, ease, and convenience, saying things such as, keep it the way it is, don't change a thing, we like the small airport feeling. Surprisingly, 10% said they would like restrooms beyond the security checkpoint. Again, I think similar numbers to what we saw in 2005. And again, another 10% said they would like better food service, a nicer bar and restaurant, better variety, so on and so forth. So we have provided the airport with the complete results of the study. This is just a high-level overview for your information at this point. But again, I think most of the results we saw were similar to most of the results from the 2005 survey. Moving on to the air service study, since we were contracted by the airport, we embarked on what we call an air service deficiency study to look at service at Santa Barbara, the neighboring airports, from every perspective possible to find out how are the current routes doing here. Are there routes we should be looking at that we don't have? Are there routes that are in danger of being discontinued? Are people going to other airports that couldn't be used in Santa Barbara, could be using Santa Barbara, and why are they doing so? And this culminated in, I believe, about a 150-page document, the highlights of which I'll give you tonight. What we see for the year ended June 2007, and we use June 2007 because the data that is reported by the airlines to the DOT can lag anywhere from 2 to 6 months. So at the time we started the process, the June 2007 data was the most current. Granted, we have new data, and I can tell you that the data that we have is generally similar to the data that we had for June 2007. Some of the numbers have changed a bit, but more importantly, the general trends that we saw with this data are the same. And we focus here on domestic O&D passengers, O&D passengers being all those passengers traveling in or out of the airport. So for the year ended June 2007, the Santa Barbara Airport had 758,000 O&D passengers in the domestic market, essentially 1,038 passengers traveling per day each way, so 1,000 out of the airport, 1,000 into the airport in the domestic markets. And again, we focus on the domestic markets because they make up about 93% of your traffic. This is a fairly impressive number. After 9/11, you could see the market lost about 14% of the passenger traffic, dropping down to about 617,000 passengers. And since then, we've obviously regained all of that traffic that was lost. Santa Barbara domestic traffic is up 23% since that trough that we hit right after 9/11. So definitely a good sign. You might ask about international passengers. Santa Barbara has 54,000 international O&D passengers. for that same time period, about 74 passengers per day each way traveling in international markets. So altogether, we had 812,000 O&D passengers for a little over 1,100 passengers per day each way traveling in and out of Santa Barbara. So the good news is traffic has definitely rebounded. You can see there's a bit of a fall off there in traffic. We're down about 4% from that most recent peak hit at the end of calendar year 2005. I think a lot of that is attributed to the nighttime closures that occurred at the airport. Some airlines discontinued some flights and haven't brought them back. So I think that's why we see that slight decline in traffic there. But the good news is that revenue has kept rising, which for passengers you might say is not the greatest news in the world, because airfares at Santa Barbara are at the highest levels that we've seen in recent years. The current data tells us that the average one-way fare is $191. Definitely not a great thing for some of the consumers in the area, but when we talk to airlines, those are the kinds of numbers that they like to see. Where are people traveling? You can see about 41% of Santa Barbara travelers are traveling within the western United States. The boxes that you see, the top box are passengers per day each way to those regions of the country. The middle box is the percentage of total passengers, and then the bottom box shows the average yield. How much are passengers paying per mile each way to travel to these parts of the country? The interesting thing that we see is about 35% of the traffic heading east or so of the Mississippi with no nonstop service. 9% of the passengers traveling to the south central portion of the United States with only one daily flight. So based on where people are going, you might be able to say, yes, we think there are opportunities for some more service. This is a snapshot of service in from March 2008. 12 airports served, 42 nonstop departures, 1,800 nonstop seat departures, and this is all outbound information. March 2008, again, is a snapshot. This is information that changes on a weekly basis and will absolutely change tomorrow when Allegiant lands starting three times a week with its 150-seat airplane, and hopefully the market responds to the point where Allegiant says 3 times a week is not enough. But I think based on everything we've seen with Allegiant and other markets, we're quite confident they'll do quite well here in Santa Barbara. So that's what the service pattern looks like nowadays. Again, this is a snapshot, and we know that come 2008, 2009, there could be some changes. There could be new lines. There may be some lines that aren't there anymore. Based on what's going on in the airline industry, we know that a lot of things will be happening in the next year or so. Could be additional bankruptcies, could be mergers, could be lots of different events occurring. We know, for example, that SkyWest will be retiring 23 of their Brazilias come the next year or so. The Brazilias, which fly to San Jose, San Francisco, and LA, and I'm sure some people are sitting in the room saying, that's wonderful, that's great news. But the question is, what will they backfill that service with? And that's what we need to stay on top of. We know that Horizon, that flies once a day to Seattle and Portland, will be retiring their 70-seat RJs. And those are the aircraft that currently fly for Horizon to Santa Barbara, so we need to help Horizon understand how else they can serve the market with different aircraft types. And we also know that recent reports have said that U.S. Airways may significantly downsize the Las Vegas hub. So again, lots of things going on in the airline industry that could to some extent impact the lines you see here, the numbers that you see here, and things that we keep a look on a daily, if not weekly basis with Terry and everyone here at the airport. Looking at seats and looking at what kind of equipment we have at the airport, currently about 40% of the seats are supplied by turboprop aircraft, 60% of the seats by regional jet aircraft. And of course, this is somewhat similar to what we saw in 2007, but drastically different than what we had in January of 2000 when we still had mainline service at Santa Barbara, and about 44% of the seats were operated by mainline aircraft. And the interesting thing is that departures are an exact opposite. Today, 60% of the departures are flown by turboprops, 40% of the departures are flown by regional jets. And a back-of-the-envelope calculation tells me that about 3% of Santa Barbara's seats will once again be provided by mainline aircraft once Allegiant starts flying tomorrow. Who is providing seats in the market? Who is carrying your passengers? About 41% of the seats in Santa Barbara are being provided by United and its partners, 18% U.S. Airways, 17% American. And if you look at emplanements, they seem to follow these trends as well. About 44% of passenger emplanements are on United, 21% U.S. Airways, 19% American. And these are generally the same kinds of figures for emplanements that we saw 3 years ago. Departures, 49% are United, 20% American, and 11% U.S. Airways. So where are people going? If we look at the data that's reported to the DOT, the top market from Santa Barbara is the Bay Area, with about 118 passengers per day each way flying to and from to and from the Bay Area. Now, you might say there are more than 118 passengers per day each way flying to the Bay Area, but this does not include those that are connecting beyond the Bay Area. These are those that are just flying to the Bay Area as their final destination. The other top markets, Seattle, Denver, Phoenix, and Las Vegas. And while it's good to know what are the top markets for Santa Barbara, the more important analysis that we want to do is to find out what are the top unserved markets. So looking at where are people flying nowadays where they do not have nonstop service, the largest being the New York area, 47 passengers per day each way at an average fare from Santa Barbara of $257 each way. Next comes the Washington market, the Chicago market, Boston, and Philadelphia. And we limited this list to those markets that had 10 or more passengers per day each way. And again, the full study lists all of the Santa Barbara markets by traffic. It also lists all the more unserved markets, so you'll get more of that information. So this is one of the first things that we will look at when trying to understand what are some of the top opportunities for new airlines at Santa Barbara. We do a whole host of other analyses, and I'll give you a quick overview of a few of them. But the first thing that we would look at, and probably a term that everyone's probably familiar with, is load factor. Essentially, how many passengers do we have on our aircraft compared to how many seats? So for the year ended June 2007, the Santa Barbara to Denver market was full with about 88% of its seats occupied. That's the high end of the spectrum. The opposite end of the spectrum was the San Jose market, which was about 41% full. And you might say to yourself, wow, 41%, that's a rather low number. But again, you always have to take load factor and then the analogous fares into comparison when you're trying to evaluate how well a market is actually doing. So the load factor is just one piece of the things that we're going to look at when we evaluate markets. The good news is that load factors at Santa Barbara right now are at record high levels. So we definitely can show the airlines there absolutely is demand. There is a response from the market in all of our markets on average. We also looked at load factor seasonality and saw that certain times of the year the Denver market, for example, got up to 95% full. So we definitely can argue for one market that needs a few additional seats. One good thing to know is that the San Francisco market was SkyWest's third most full market with the Brazilias from San Francisco. So of the 10 markets that they fly from San Francisco with only Brazilias, Santa Barbara had the third highest load factor. And we looked at all 65 markets that ExpressJet flies in its branded operation, and Sacramento, Santa Barbara had the 7th highest load factor of all of ExpressJet's markets. We look at local versus connect. How many passengers on board the aircraft are just flying from Santa Barbara to the ultimate destination of that flight? How many are then connecting onwards? Sometimes we find flights that have a lot of connecting passengers, and if there are a lot of connecting passengers and high load factors, we can say to the airline, hey, you're not making enough room for the local Santa Barbara passengers that just want to fly from here to wherever that aircraft is going. We also look at O&D passengers versus capacity. So, for example, we know in the Seattle market that there are 69 passengers per day each way that want to go from Santa Barbara to Seattle. We also know that Horizon, on average, is providing 69 seats per day each way. So what that tells us is Horizon is providing just enough capacity for the current demand we have in the market. And since that's on average, we know that there are certain times of the year, certain days of the week, where there are more than that number of passengers and not enough seats. So again, a good opportunity for some additional capacity. And then last but not least, we also looked at nonstop passengers versus O&D passengers. So in looking at all the markets where you have service, how many passengers are actually taking the nonstop service versus still opting to connect even though they have nonstop service? Not surprisingly, we found that about 99% of the passengers going to San Jose are actually taking the nonstop service. How the other 1% are getting there is a good question. But we have opposite ends of the spectrum. We've got 99% of the passengers taking that nonstop to San Jose. Then we have other markets where about 60 to 70% of the passengers are utilizing the nonstop service and the rest are connecting somehow. And there could be many different reasons for that. And we do go into that in the full text of the study. But I think probably the most poignant analysis that we did, something that we do for most of our airport clients that are located near other larger facilities, is the leakage analysis. And please don't confuse this with a trip to the doctor. This is a... Okay, didn't work. What leakage analysis will tell us is how many passengers that should be using Santa Barbara are actually using the airport or choosing to fly from different airports. And this is very powerful information because it helps the airlines understand that should they make service improvements here in Santa Barbara, there is the ability to recapture those passengers that for some reason choose to drive to LA, Burbank, or other airports. So the first thing we had to do was define our catchment area. So what we're looking at is, should all airports have equal service, the passengers in this yellow area should choose to fly from Santa Barbara. And we effectively have all of those zip codes which are within a 60-minute drive time of the airport plus the Santa Maria area. And we didn't exactly count Oxnard and Santa Maria given their limited traffic patterns. So again, should Santa Barbara have the same service as San Luis Obispo, LA, and Burbank, we think that those passengers there in the yellow area would choose Santa Barbara as their preferred airport. And we know that not all of them do, and that's what we'll get into a bit. So we found in that yellow area, and we're looking right now at just traffic from that yellow area as opposed to those inbound passengers. We found about 31,000 bookings to the Bay Area, 26,000 to Washington, 22,000 to Las Vegas. So then the question is, of those 31,000 bookings to the Bay Area, how many are using our airport and how many are going to other airports? And what we found is that for all of those tickets that were booked with zip codes from the yellow area, 48% of those passengers are going to LAX for their trips and not using Santa Barbara. We found 24% using Santa Barbara, 13% Burbank. And again, these are averages. If you look at certain regions of the country, we found that actually 40% of the people who were traveling to the Rocky Mountain region from that yellow area that we showed were using Santa Barbara. And then conversely, about 17% of those passengers from the yellow area traveling to Alaska or Hawaii were using Santa Barbara. So again, this is on average, and we show in the study, market by market, what percentage of passengers are actually using Santa Barbara for service throughout the country. So you're asking, well, why are people going to LA and why are they going to Burbank? Obviously, they're going because LA and Burbank have nonstop service to destinations we do not have at Santa Barbara, or they do have additional service that we don't have. So there might be markets where we have 2-3 flights a day, and LA has upwards of 20. So obviously people going for the flexibility and the convenience of schedules. But when it comes down to it, most people are probably going because of lower fares as well. The top 4 markets you see in the western United States, the first column we've got the average one-way fare out of Santa Barbara, and then we show Southwest's fare from Burbank and Southwest fare at LA. And you could see the Southwest fares at those markets are significantly cheaper. From Burbank, for example, Sacramento is about 66% cheaper each way. The Bay Area from LA on Southwest is about 82% cheaper. And then we looked at additional markets in the Southwest, which are the markets you see on the bottom, and you could see fares to Phoenix from Santa Barbara are more than double than Southwest's fares to Phoenix from Burbank or LA. So I think we can hypothesize that's a pretty good reason that people are driving to the other airports to fly to Phoenix. Interestingly enough, Austin was only about 11% more expensive at Santa Barbara than Southwest fares from Burbank, 21% more expensive than Southwest fares from LAX, which goes to explain why, if we look at the total leakage, we look at all of the passengers from that yellow area not using Santa Barbara, 35% are using Southwest, 32% are using United, 11% are using American. What we found in total, and we'll start with the domestic market first, was that Santa Barbara generated 758,000 O&D passengers for the year ended June 2007, which is that number that I showed you on the curve a few charts ago. We found another 289,000 passengers with zip codes in that yellow area that were driving to other airports to fly in the domestic market. And then conversely, we found 231,000 passengers that are flying to LA or flying to Burbank and then driving up to the Santa Barbara area. So altogether, there are about 1.3 million domestic passengers in that yellow area, 41% of which are driving to other airports. Then if we do the same on the international side, we have 54,000 O&D passengers actually using Santa Barbara, 149,000 additional passengers who live or have zip codes in the yellow area driving to other airports to fly internationally. Then we have 55,000 passengers who are traveling from international destinations and again flying to LA or flying to, well, probably not flying to Burbank, but let's say flying to LA and then driving up to Santa Barbara. So in the international market, 79% of your passengers are driving to other airports, most of which are going to Guadalajara and Mexico City. So what we find in total is about 47% of your captive market, those passengers in the yellow portion on that map, driving to other airports. So you say, well, what opportunity do we have to recapture the leakage, to recapture those passengers going to other markets? Here we show some of the markets that we think have the best potential for recapturing passengers. Now again, there are a number of different things that have to happen to recapture these passengers. Additional frequencies out of Santa Barbara, new nonstop destinations out of Santa Barbara, bigger airplanes, better fares. All of these factors, to one extent or another, have to be met to recapture this leakage. And again, these are the kinds of things that we're talking to the airlines on a regular basis, trying to help them understand how service improvements here in Santa Barbara will just recapture all of those passengers. So using all of the analyses that we've shown you and using the leakage analysis, we've come up with a set of opportunities that we think the airport needs to focus on. The first set of opportunities are candidate markets for route frequency increases. So all of the markets that you see there, the 10 markets, which let's face it, are just about every market currently served from Santa Barbara, we think could use additional frequencies. And these are additional frequencies because they're only served once a day. There are additional frequencies because maybe they're served twice a day and they need an additional frequency to provide the proper amount of schedule convenience for business travelers. Or they are routes that are flown multiple times per day but have a significant gap during the day, which we think needs to be filled in. Candidate markets for capacity increases. Any of you who have flown to Dallas or Seattle or Denver probably take a note that there aren't many empty seats on the airplane. So we think that these are candidate markets for additional capacity, be it larger aircraft, or again, be it additional frequencies. The focus here are those markets where we need more seats to serve the demand. And then last but not least, those candidate markets for new nonstop service. Based on all the analyses that we showed before, based on our insight into the industry, what we know certain carriers are doing, what we know certain carriers are not doing, we think these are some of the opportunities for nonstop service. Now, again, we need to take a step back from what you see here. We know what's going on in the airline industry. Fuel hit $132 a barrel yesterday, which is about 52% higher than it was when I spoke to you literally 7 months ago. So we've seen dramatic changes in the airline industry. We know Delta and Northwest are going to merge. We know there could be additional mergers out there. There could be additional bankruptcies out there. Some airlines could altogether disappear. We found out today from American they will be retiring 75 airplanes, including aircraft types that fly here, unfortunately. They will be reducing their domestic capacity by about 12%. So given all of these things that we show here, there are opportunities for airlines, and these are the targets that the airport should be focusing on. But to be quite frank, at this point in time, I think a distinct focus on keeping what we have is of predominant importance. Working with the airlines to help them understand how they're successful in Santa Barbara, how they can continue to be successful, and if they're looking to make changes, make sure they understand the results of their changes, and sometimes help them understand why, if they're looking to cut service, it makes sense to keep service at Santa Barbara versus obviously other airports. It definitely is a challenging environment right now, and every day we open the paper and we see more and more bad news. And we do know across the country airports of Santa Barbara's size, smaller than Santa Barbara and larger than Santa Barbara, that are losing service. So again, a focus on maintaining what we have now with, of course, always targeting what you see up here as well, I think should be sort of the top priorities going forward. And we know the airport is doing everything that they can to remain in contact with carriers and meet with carriers, such as at the Jumpstart meeting in Pittsburgh in June, where the airport will meet with a number of carriers to address these very issues. So there definitely are opportunities out there. I'm sure some of these opportunities will come to fruition, but at the same time, a number of other things could happen in the industry as well to put some of these plans on hold for a little while. And with that, I thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have one. Do you folks have any comparison data to the price of automotive gasoline at the time the survey was done versus today?
No, we don't. And that definitely would be an interesting comparison to see.
Because it dawns on me that a lot of people's thinking is based on a very narrow-sighted, what's the price of the ticket versus
Right.
They haven't figured out what it costs to drive their car down there and to park it, or even take an Airbus-type service, and that strikes me as an advertising opportunity, maybe even cooperation with the airlines. Because, of course, it sounds like it's a cart versus the horse problem. The airlines won't bring more service until you can show them they have enough passengers, and
Right.
you can't get enough passengers until they have the service.
Absolutely.
So the other quick question I had for Hazel is, my understanding is Allegiant only flies 3 times a week, that their airplanes sit on the ground the other, because I've seen them.
Sit on the ground in Santa Barbara?
In Vegas. They do not actually operate flights on the days that they don't fly. Their whole marketing plan is based on operating 3 days a week.
Shall I address that?
Is that?
Allegiant is a very unique animal, indeed. And if you look at every market throughout their route map, they serve markets anywhere from 2 to 9 times a week, with the average being about 3 or 4. What they generally do is fly all of those markets on days other than Tuesdays and Wednesdays, because that's where the demand is. On Tuesdays and Wednesdays, they fly some charters, And they fly a number of charters. They have a number of aircraft just dedicated to charter flights that they fly for Harrah's Casino, for example. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are also the days when they do maintenance checks on their airplanes. And to some extent, they do a bit less flying on Saturday as well. And they do overnight a lot of their airplanes at Las Vegas because for them it makes more sense to bring the airplanes to Las Vegas at night, so they're all there overnight. They can do any maintenance that needs to be done, and all of their crew is based there, so they don't have to pay hotel rooms at the outstations. And then in the morning, all the airplanes head out. So that's generally how they operate, and they do not operate any red-eye flights either. They might have one or two, but that's it.
I'm just wondering if our attempt to get them on more days might be futile because it's not in their business plan to go to a place.
If the community responds and they see the fares that they're looking for, they absolutely will add the capacity. There are markets, for example, the example I'm familiar with, they originally announced Stockton, California, I believe, with 3 flights per week. And the response was so impressive that before they even started, they increased their schedule to 5 times per week. And Allegiant is also the carrier that will fly 3 times per week for some months, then go to 4 times per week, and possibly down to 2. So they will definitely adjust capacity based on the seasonality of demand.
Thank you.
A couple questions. You did a kind of a customer passenger satisfaction survey, and you've got roughly 50% of the passengers scoring 9 or 10 on the airport. Do you have the data there, or familiar with the data to characterize what the other 50% were saying?
I don't have it in front of me, but we do have it. We do have it, and it is provided in the report to the airport. I just don't have it in front of me
Hopefully they're all,
now.
7 or 8 or something.
Right.
The other 50% would be great. The other question I had was on your comparative fare analysis.
Yes.
You analyzed, you really just compared, or what you presented was comparing fares here with Southwest out of just a couple locations. Did you do a more extensive comparative fare analysis to multiple destinations?
We did, but we thought that these are the most illustrative because most of the leakage that we see is to LA and to Burbank, and it's to Southwest. Mm-hmm. We saw a little over a third of the leakage is to Southwest. So we thought it would be most instructive to look at those markets. Because, again, Southwest is setting the fares in all of those markets. It's highly unusual that it's the Uniteds or Americans that are setting the fares. And if Southwest is commanding those kinds of fares in these markets, it's quite likely that everyone else's fares are a little bit higher, if not similar.
Okay, for those markets, but I'm also wondering about other markets.
Mm-hmm.
Just maybe a broad-based fare comparison, just here to Boston,
right,
versus LA to Boston. I think that's what a lot of people, they go out there and they shop in all these great tools you've got today, and you see, that's another whatever X dollars for you to fly out of here versus fly out of LA. I think a lot of people, that kind of a sticker shock is what steers them down to LA.
If I'm not mistaken, we did that analysis. I think these were the markets where there were the biggest discrepancies. But we can take a look and provide a more detailed analysis of fare comparison if you'd like.
Yeah, I was just curious if that was in there. That was certainly the airport's decision.
Any of you that would like a copy of the full report, we'd be happy to provide that for you.
I have a question also on Southwest.
Yes.
When you did the comparison, did you ask a question if it was more than just price that made them go to Burbank or Los Angeles?
For the fare comparison that we showed, there is fares taken out of the data that the airlines report to the DOT. Okay. That wasn't data that was acquired directly from the passengers, so we couldn't exactly say you paid such and such, why did you do so? And to do so, we would effectively have to survey all those passengers taking Southwest down at Burbank and LAX. I don't know how well their airport management would take to us doing surveys in their airport.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say that would be a help if you could get.
Absolutely.
What I'm thinking is the people on the fringes, because if you ask somebody, for example, who lives in Simi Valley, would they rather drive the same time or probably longer to get to LAX versus fly to Santa Barbara if they actually had a comparable opportunity with a whole lot easier access, cheaper parking, we'll assume? What kind of, what do you call it? Could we get their leakage to have it come the other way?
Yeah, absolutely. We could leakage recapture. And absolutely, if there's anything we can do to pull the people out of their cars as they drive past Santa Barbara to come use this airport, absolutely.
But is there any way to get any of the data from the airlines as to the zip codes that use their service in order to entice them to serve here?
What we can find is, on a zip code by zip code basis, how many passengers for each zip code were traveling to other airports, and to which markets and to which airlines. And it actually is quite effective because it could tell us which zip codes, which areas we have the most leakage, and that's where an airport, for example, can target its marketing campaign and say to people in that area, hey, you're driving right past our airport, come to our airport because of X, Y, and Z. And it's actually a very effective use of the data that we used in this study.
Reminds me, when we first started our marketing program, we bought a billboard down in Oxnard area, and it said, you could be flying in the air now or flying now, use Santa Barbara Airport. So
I have one question that isn't really related to your report, but when I was in Los Angeles recently, they have a park and fly, with the hotels.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of does any of our hotels offer something like that? Any of the local that you're aware of?
Not that I know of. We had talked, when we were updating our kind of internal strategic plan, one of our ideas was to look into being able to check in at your hotel and then not have to deal with your bags anymore once you left the hotel. But in checking with the it's usually an arrangement between the airlines, we understand, and the hotel. And I'm not sure our market is quite big enough for that at this point.
There are third-party vendors that provide that kind of service in Las Vegas and a handful of other markets. It's not very widespread just yet, but it's a great service. But they also do charge for it as well. I think to some extent it might be $10 per bag if you check your bags at some of the Vegas hotels.
Any other questions? Okay, I guess we'll move on with the administrative reports. Thank you very much.
Oh, you
To get that.
do you want me to do it? No.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You can tilt it your way. Item 12 on your agenda tonight is a recommendation for a lease agreement with Mercury Air Center doing business as Atlantic Aviation as an FBO in the airport. I thought I would start by giving you a little background information about Mercury's operation and their current lease agreement with the city. Probably before 2004, Mercury was operating under multiple short-term leases. Most of those were month-to-month for various buildings that they occupied and for the area that the ramp space as well. They occupied at that time about 9 acres overall with 4 buildings, 19 T hangars, 18 of which were owned by Mercury, and they also had a separate agreement with the airport for a fuel farm lease. At that time, Mercury had a proposal. They needed to make some improvements in their air center, and they came to the airport and indicated that they would invest at least $1 million in their improvements. And in exchange for that, the airport said that we would give you a 5-year lease with a 5-year option. If you make the improvements, then you're eligible for the option. The activities under the FBO lease continued to be a full-service FBO that included ground handling, aircraft storage, maintenance. We also put a requirement that they had to have a flight school in the agreement, and provide fuel through their fuel farm. The premises, as I said, included 9 acres, and we had an exhibit at that time that took the leasehold and identified 3 parcels. Parcels A and B were the 2 parcels that were initially leased to Mercury. That lease also provided for recovery provision so that at the time that the airport needed the land for the airline terminal improvement project, we had the right to tell Mercury that we needed the space back, and if we did recover it, then we would make the obligation that we would pay for the relocation of the T hangars on their premises. This exhibit shows you the 2004 leasehold. You'll notice on the very right-hand side, the little rectangular box, that's parcel A, that's adjacent to the airline terminal. If you go to the top of the slide, that's where the parallel runways are located. And then the central part was Mercury's leasehold. And then the third parcel is where the old Pilot House Motel swimming pool was located. And in that lease, we said that if the airport needs parcel A, then in exchange for that, we'll give you parcel C, because we realize that we're going to be impacting the premises that you're operating on. In 2005, Mercury came back to the airport. The cost or the investment that they were making and their improvements exceeded $1 million. Their development plan required the additional space in parcel C in order to meet the city's requirements for parking as well as adding on to the building. So in 2005, the airport and the city agreed that we would amend their agreement to give them parcel C. We maintained the provision that we could reclaim the land for the terminal, but at that point we didn't need it, so we didn't exercise that recovery. We also included a provision whereby the airport had agreed to make some improvements on parcel C, grading, paving, some landscaping, and some fencing. But since Mercury was doing their construction, we said, if you'll go ahead and do that, then we'll reimburse you for those costs up to $550,000. So tonight, the lease that's before you, Mercury has completed all of their construction. We've had the premises resurveyed for the parcels. We're adjusting the rental, and we still are maintaining the recovery provision because right now the terminal hasn't started construction, but we anticipate that happening between now and the end of the year. And in particular, the ramp reconstruction that's going on at the airline terminal will start in July. We have new exhibits of the new exhibit of the premises. The term of this particular agreement before you tonight remains the same. It's still 2013. As you know, it's the intent of the airport director that all general aviation leases, FBO leases, expire in 2013. This is the new leasehold that's being proposed. You'll notice in the dark blue on the bottom part of the screen, you'll notice the parking lot and the revision to Mercury's Air Center. The red area, which is parcel A, and a little bit more land going over towards Hangar 5 to the west of Hangar 5, that's been identified in the most recent layout plans for the new airline terminal that is needed for that project. Additionally, up along Bravo, you'll see a thin rectangular piece that had previously been used by Mercury. It had never been actually included in the leasehold. There's a similar piece to the right of that where tie downs occur today. That too has been used but not part of the leasehold. So what we want to do is kind of clean up some of the premises, incorporate them all, and then have a total agreement with the same term and make the rental balance with what we have. So tonight we're recommending that you approve this lease agreement with Mercury and or doing business as Atlantic Aviation.
Do I have any questions or comments?
I guess my comment would be that there's been a considerable amount of discussion on this, and I know we spent quite a bit of time on it in the lease subcommittee, and as well I spent almost an hour, was that Wednesday, with the director and assistant director trying to understand this. I know there's a lot of people that have been kind of following it, and there has been some suggestion that not approving this lease might have some effect on getting the T-hanger relocations worked out, but I don't believe that's the case. And I quote from the director's email this afternoon to City Council and others. And those, I'm not sure how many of you had a chance, that was at 10 minutes to 5, but her statement that delaying approval of the lease that is on the agenda tonight would not alter the T-hanger relocation project. So I would move that we approve the lease.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Chair, maybe we could have Hazel just kind of update you on
Okay.
kind of the latest information on the T-hanger relocation. And I know that Atlantic's manager is in the audience, Roger Rontepierre, and I don't know if he wants to say anything or not, but at least Hazel can give a brief update.
Okay, great.
I must tell you that when we negotiated the lease and we volunteered to relocate T-hangers, I didn't realize exactly some of the difficulties in doing that. We have been working with Roger on developing a plan to relocate the T-hangers. And as you noticed, they're not in the best of condition. They're very old porta-ports, but they're usable. And so the airport contracted with Pacific Steel Company, I believe, to pay the cost for the relocation. We have a purchase order for that. And we've worked with our airline consultants or airport consultants to do various layout plans for how those T-hangers could be laid out on Mercury's ramp. And the T-hangers are various sizes, so nesting them together is a real trick. But the experience from Pacific West, because that's what they do, they're a licensed port-to-port company to move them. They're working on that today. As a matter of fact, I met with Roger this morning, and Pacific Steel was on site doing an evaluation of the hangars to find out their condition, current condition, how to put them on the ramp, and then what repairs would be needed on each of the facilities or each of the hangars once they are relocated. And Roger and I discussed that there looks like a very positive possibility to move 12 to 14 hangars on Mercury's ramp. 2 of the hangars are currently not habitable because the doors have been blown off, I think, with high winds and bad weather. 1 hangar is vacant currently, and then there's an extra large hangar that's 70 foot wide on the door that is also in question. 1 hangar is personally owned, and they have been asked to relocate from the premises, but to another location on the airport. And the airport has agreed to pay for that cost of relocation as if they could work something out with another tenant on the airfield. At this point, our window of opportunity to relocate the T-hangars is the week of June 7th or 9th. And at this point, I think we'll go forward. There is another opportunity in July. I'm not sure what that date would be, but our bids are due for the ramp and the widening of Taxiway Bravo on June 4th. And the engineers tell me they anticipate starting construction no later than July 23rd. So we're prepared to send notice to Mercury that we need to relocate and take back the land, relocate the T-hangars and take back the land for the Airline Terminal Improvement Project effective June 30th. So hopefully we'll have it all taken care of and paid for at that time. Roger's here, and certainly I don't want to speak for him. That was the result of our meeting this morning, and I think he may want to make some comments.
Thank you, Hazel and Karen and everyone with the commission. Your support has been very much appreciated. We are planning to move 12 to 14 minimum of the T-hangers to the south portion of our property. One of the problems that we have by doing that is it's going to reduce the amount of tie-downs. We're working with the airport to at least come up with a deadline of when we're going to be able to, or when we're going to have to vacate the area of what we call North Bravo. Because of the taxiway widening that area, we're going to have to move those aircraft, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen quite as quickly as the T-hangar relocation. So I met with the president of Pacific Steel today, and we went over the whole scenario of the hangars and the conditions of the hangars and what it would cost to repair each hangar to make them movable. Just to reiterate what Hazel said, I mean, there are 30-year-old porta-ports. We're going to do the best we can to make them structurally sound, and once they are relocated, all the doors will be adjusted. It'll be the best scenario of anything. I mean, the last thing Atlantic wants to do is get rid of the hangars. But two, we're also obligated for tie-downs as well as transient parking. So, having said that, we have 40 based tie-down customers, and currently with the land that we just developed and moving the majority of the T-hangars to that south end, that would leave us about a dozen tie-downs in that location, and then a dozen in front of hangar number 5. So we are still short, a considerable amount of tie-downs for the base customers. But we're looking at other options with the airport to locate those tie-downs, and it would be more effective or an easier transition to put the tie-downs somewhere else on the field due to transitional surface and other reasons than it would be to try to locate the T-hangars on another portion of the field. So first things first, we're going to relocate the hangars, almost all of them. And then we'll take it one step at a time as far as how we handle the tie-downs. The area of South Bravo that's now going to be addition 2 is designated specifically for transient customers, and we have to leave that. That's part of our lease agreement, and it just has to remain for transient customers, which is a total of 12 spots. So, I mean, it is what it is. I would have preferred the terminal to go east instead of south. But, that's water under the bridge, so we'll just make the best of it. And the staff has been wonderful. We just have to get through it.
Is your current plan including all of the hangars that are currently occupied with the one owned hangar being moved off-site? Will it then accommodate everybody, or is the 70-foot hangar still a question as to where it will go?
The 70-foot hangar is very questionable. The doors are that hangar is in a pretty bad state of disrepair.
Does it have an airplane in it?
Yes, it does. And I've told the owner that it's not looking too good for that his airplane in that hangar, but we might have another hangar that his aircraft would fit. So we're going to try to accommodate him as much as possible. If not, we do have the 40,000 square foot hangar at the Ampersand facility, which he could also locate his aircraft if he had to. But it's at a much higher rate than what he's currently paying for the T hangar.
I assume he has the 70-foot hangar because he needs that large of a hangar.
Well, he has a Cirrus in it. He doesn't need that big of a hangar.
Okay.
It was just the only hangar at the time that would fit the aircraft because it has a broader wingspan. And he has no problem with it too big of a hangar, just, one that would be too small wouldn't work for him. And there has been a lot of talk about some other individuals who are in the hangars wanting to buy some of the hangars and potentially relocate them to another location on the field. We're looking at that. But right now, 2 hangars, the ones with the doors off, are more than likely beyond economical repair. And then the one very large one is also, it looks like it's beyond economical repair as well. It's just a liability. The thing's really fallen apart. And then one is privately owned.
So the only person who really has a problem is the 70-foot hangar. The rest of them that are occupied, with the exception of the owned one, can be relocated.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Pacific Steel is going to get back to me within the next couple of days because naturally there will be an expense to it, but I don't think that the cost to repair those hangars will prevent us from moving them.
Any other questions?
No, that's...
Okay.
Well, I'm sure we're all looking forward to having this resolved, and hopefully we won't lose or minimize the number of lost hangars, because I think, as everyone knows, there's a critical shortage, or at least a painful shortage of small hangars here. And I certainly hope, as far as the tie downs, that we can get some quality tie downs, because winds like we're having today should remind us that we need good tie downs, including those tail tie downs.
Well, the city of the airport put in the new tie downs, and they're wonderful. They all have 3 spaces.
That's
Bruce,
right, and they heard about it
you know,
from me about 4 months running.
and I could sleep easier now that those tie downs are there, and they're absolutely top notch.
But that's
hopefully
our,
the new tie down locations will be equally top notch.
and that's our next thing that we're working on right now is identifying locations for the tie downs. So we're getting there.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
So that brings us on to item number 13, the subcommittee reports. And we have 3 of them. Do I have a volunteer to go first?
I don't mind, because we just about covered everything in my report.
Okay.
The General Aviation Subcommittee met on May 13th, and there was no public comment. Would you like me to go over the same thing that's on everybody, the proposed Atlantic Aviation, although we just approved it? You would like, okay. The subject was a proposed lease for Atlantic Aviation. Recommendation that the General Aviation Subcommittee receive a status report on the proposed new lease between Atlantic Aviation and the City of Santa Barbara for approximately 453,457 square feet of land, including building 121, 124, and half of 122, to commence June 1st, 2008, and end July 31st, 2013, for a monthly rental of $16,369, exclusive of utilities. Action was, we received the report, airport to set up a public meeting June 3rd, 2008, at 6 p.m. at the Airport Administration Building with the General Aviation Subcommittee and Atlantic tenants to discuss the following: the airport terminal project, construction schedule, the airport's commitment to relocate Atlanta's T hangars, other possible locations for tie downs for Santa Barbara-based aircraft. Subject number 2 was the T hangars at Atlantic Aviation. Recommendation that the General Aviation Subcommittee receive a status report on the relocation of Atlantic Aviation's T hangars to another part of their leasehold. Action, we received a report. The next subject was the South Service Fueling RFP. Recommendation that the General Aviation Subcommittee receive a status report on the South Service Fueling RFP, and we received a report. We ended at 5 o'clock.
Great. I might just add for commissions,
Still on director's report.
oh, I'm sorry. I won't do that. The boss will. Sorry.
All right, shall we move on with the, how about the Public Relations Subcommittee?
We had a meeting, May 13th. There's 2 programs that we were discussing. The Pay on Foot program, which is automated parking. I thought at first that meant that if you were driving a Volkswagen, you paid one thing. If you're driving a Humvee, you're paying something else. But what this program is an automated system whereby as you're getting your baggage, you can pay your parking fees. As you're sitting waiting for somebody, you can pay your parking fees by going up to a machine and inserting your parking ticket, your credit card, or money, and receiving a little ticket. And similar to what we have down at Paseo Nuevo, as you go out, you would put the little ticket in the slot, and the door and the bar would go up, and you could exit. I had asked, this had come up before, and I had asked if there was any problems with this type of system, if there's any reports. Well, there's nothing written except that John Wayne Airport uses it. I think that's one, wasn't it, John Wayne? You're not going to get anything bad if it's connected with John Wayne, you know that. So anyhow, it was. There's been no bad reports, even though I still have some consideration. If you getting your luggage, you pay your fee. They're giving you a certain amount of time to get to your car, get in your car, and drive around and exit the terminal. So it's a good program. Now, first off, they had a little problem getting some of the equipment, but I think lot number 2 will be the first to be converted. I'm not sure the locations of the machines within the building, except at the baggage and maybe a couple other places. And I think that'll be done around July, as I had it. The second program is the ambassador program wanting to be initiated, especially now that we're going to start tearing up the place. We need people that'll help point people in the right direction, help tell you what's going on, also talk to you about the community as passengers are coming in. So as we're doing things, now this ambassador program is strictly a volunteer program, similar to what you might say the Dolsons or something of this sort, except our people will be a little more active. It'll be a volunteer job. We're preparing, hopefully it will start, I believe, around in August, or we'll have enough recruiters to start that. It'll be, there'll be some benefits to doing it for the people that are doing the job, but I think mostly it was a program we had, about 4 or 5 years ago?
Probably almost 10 years ago.
Something like that, maybe 10 years ago. I remember Mr. Cunningham, I think, was always greeting people. It's a good program, and it needs to be backed up. If you yourselves, or if you know of anybody that might be interested, contact us. And there's several agencies that are doing the RSVP, UCSB, Community Affairs, and of course, look at our websites, there'll be stuff on it. But it's a good program. We need something like that as people are coming in, not only language problems, but just where to go in the terminal, and as we get more tore up, and where to go in the community, sites to see, layout plans. So I think it'll be a good program, and I hope to, maybe I'll try and volunteer to do it too as I'm terminating here. That's all I have.
Terrific, thank you.
Let's see, you have something more to add,
No, very,
I was going to ask if, given the mandatory requirements in many schools and colleges for intern programs and credit, there might be something either in a city college public relations course that could send their people out to do internships here that might be able to fulfill this at a no cost to us and college credit to them, or even some of the airline, I don't know if we still have, do we still have an airline travel school in Santa Barbara that used to train? Or is the internet kind of killed res agent training? But I'm just thinking that any of the public service agencies that offer community credit like that.
Good idea.
good idea.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least,
The lease review subcommittee met Thursday the 15th. Commissioner Griffin and myself were there. And much of it was just kind of standard lease review. Probably the more notable activities were certainly there was quite a bit of discussion about the Atlantic aviation lease. I think we've all heard about that. Another notable activity has been the leases with the rental car agencies, and really they're kind of preparatory leases, I guess you'd say, to demonstrate the financial viability of the quick turnaround facility. So those are in place so that we know we have tenants for that facility. There was also some, so we had the Allegiant lease there that we approved tonight on the consent calendar. And that is, I guess you could probably say that was one of the first leases based on more of a cost element structure. And I think that we can look forward to some work in the future, the airport developing a cost structure schedule for carrier leases so that it's will ideally minimize the amount of work that goes into negotiating different carrier leases. It's just kind of a fixed, if you're using this many square feet, it's this with these amenities and kind of a menu approach. And I think that covers most of the most of the notables there.
Great, thank you. Actually, just in time, Legion's starting tomorrow. We're glad we approved their lease tonight.
Don't do it early.
And the next item is the director's report.
Okay. Our passenger count for April was up 0.7%, so essentially we're even with April of 2007. Passenger count year-to-date is up 2.7% as compared to the same period last year. Just before the meeting, Hazel and I were talking about John Wayne Airport has had a decrease in passengers, I think almost every month this year. They regularly send out press releases with their passenger count. So it was interesting that we're on the positive side, which is kind of nice. As Hazel began to tell you, steals all my thunder, the proposals for the self-service fuel facility are due on May 29th at 3 p.m., and we've already received one proposal. It remains sealed until the opening date, but that's pretty exciting. So I think Hazel did a good job in putting that together. A terminal project, we received AVR final this week on Monday, so that's done. We're out to bid on the aircraft parking ramp part of the project. We've gone to sign committee and have gotten a pretty positive response to our sign program. They wanted the font to be a little bit different, so we'll need to go back with that. And probably next month I'll give you kind of a comprehensive look at where we are and some pretty pictures to show you. The arts program, we've been meeting with a subcommittee of the Visual Arts and Public Places Committee of the City Arts Commission, or Committee, and looking at some art pieces that they have in their collection that they may be willing to let us have on a long-term loan for the terminal. One is a very large mural. The name of the artist is just slipping my mind right at the moment. Channing Peak. And it was in the El Paseo restaurant for many years. It's very bright and festive looking, kind of a fiesta looking design. So hopefully we'll be able to acquire that on a loan. And then also just putting together the public arts program in terms of soliciting public art for the terminal as it's under construction. So that's pretty exciting. So I'll bring some more information on that particular project. The T-hanger project is complete. The door tracks that caused such a problem have been all replaced on all the hangars, and to my knowledge, we haven't received any new or other complaints. Have you?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you heard any?
Bruce?
No. So I think we're good with that. And it's nice to have that project where people are, getting to use it and function on a daily basis, and it looks nice and works well. Airfield safety projects in the next probably month or so we'll be going for the notice of completion on that project. So that will get off of our list, which will be nice. Consolidated rental car quick turn facility, bids are due May 29th, so we'll start seeing some activity on that probably in July, late June, July. And then I guess Chair Khan had asked me to make a short oral report on the field trip that some of our staff took to the Chino Airport in February to just visit the airport and a hangar development that has been built there recently. And it was the design of these hangars. There were 8 hangars for lease or sale. And they were large hangars. I was looking for the square footage before the meeting, and I couldn't find the exact number. But I'd say they're probably
Big.
20,000 square foot hangars. The gentleman that built the development is into antique aircraft, and kind of his antique aircraft fever has spread to other people that are buying or leasing these hangars. So They have mezzanines with, nice facilities. They have a barbecue area, landscaping. It's very, very beautiful. The architectural design is the golden era of aviation, so he tries to match it to the history of the airport. So it just gave an idea of what, as we, develop the general aviation kind of master plan for the future, some of the possibilities that exist. I'm sure that he would be more than happy to have commissioners come out. Unfortunately, none were able to attend, just to kind of take a look. But I mean, it's kind of fun to go see what some future possibilities might be. What it doesn't necessarily have to be this developer, but kind of stretch our imaginations a little. So.
Great.
I did have
Go ahead.
a couple questions, actually. Unless somebody else did. Actually, I want to congratulate you on the T-Hanger project. I haven't heard any complaints other than I still have one minor outstanding complaint, and that is if we're supposed to refer to them as hangars 7, 8, or 9, or maybe it's something like that, it sure would be nice to get signs on the things. I talked to Mr. Reynolds, and I guess there are issues, and it sounds like the airport has a tradition of not identifying hangars, and it seems baffling to me why you would not put a big sign on a hangar to tell you what number it is if everybody's supposed to know what the number is. And his response is, well, everybody who needs to know knows what hangar number 2 is, or number 5, or number 7, or number 8. I'm not sure how the rest of us are supposed to know that.
Well, Leaf actually did do some dummy signs to put up for me to look at. And to me, it was more confusing having the signs up because you have these signs on there that say, I don't know if it says buildings or hangars 1 through 10 or whatever the numbers are. Then you have this big sign that says hangar 9 on it. To me, it was very confusing. We did check with the fire department because really they are very critical people to make sure that they can find it. And they said it was less confusing to not have the bigger numbers up there. I don't think there's any hangar on the airport that has a hangar number that's bigger than maybe this.
If even that.
If even a number.
That's really my point. Not so much those particular hangars. I can understand the issue because each one of the door has a number on it. But
right.
I know I've been given instructions to go over to hangar 5, and how on earth anybody would know. And I would have thought at an airport where you would want to minimize confusion that you would want to be able to clearly identify large buildings.
If we could find a different way of, I don't know how you would those particular hangars, because I think having 2 numbering systems up there is more confusing than not having any large numbering on the hangar.
Let me ask
I can understand that in those particular ones, but those are right next to hangar 2. Now, how anybody would know that was hangar 2 if you didn't have a map is still a mystery to me.
I guess my question is, what does air traffic control refer to them as? Because if you need to give them an accurate position of where you are, what is it that you say when you first call them for taxi? That's another point, is asking, because they want to know I'm specifically in front of hangar X.
And the tower does. We did check with the tower when we were building the hangars about numbering them or what they were going to be called.
Lettering them.
And they, whatever we ended up with was what they said worked. So
apparently they have a map. I'm not sure how even somebody who's coming out of hangar 2 would know they were coming out of hangar 2, because it doesn't say hangar 2 on it.
It has a street address, though.
Right.
I bet the tower doesn't know the street address.
I think the other thing you might do is use spot numbers. If there is a particular place where the airplane's coming off that row, stop, and then need to call the tower, say, I'm at spot, if you want to give it golf, if you want to give it a letter, and spot golf refers to hangars from the 5 to 8, and maybe that's painted on the ground so that people who are there in that area know how to refer to that, and then you tell the tower that. because that's what frequently happens when there's a fair amount of confusion, a lot of people coming out of the same place. But that also tells them where you're going. It also allows them to warn someone when there's traffic in that
You're coming
direction.
out, right.
Yeah, I would just encourage the airport to look into signage for some of these big hangars. That it just seems to be tribal lore that people know what the hangar number is, because I can't see that they're identified anywhere. Maybe the people who rent the space know what hangar they're in. But
Oh, I'm sure they do.
it just seems like the sort of thing that one would want to have signs on.
But I think in terms of people who are not familiar with the airport coming in, I think they're still going to have to be steered by the tower. I mean, it's kind of overwhelming when you land, you're on the ground, and you're trying to find out where you are, and the tower is going to tell you basically how to get to Signature, who has a giant sign up. So
Well, I think
I don't
what-
know, but we could look into it. But what I want to also make it very clear for is the tower who is steering people around and the fire department who is responding to it. I mean, it makes no difference to me. I know where the hangars are. I know what their numbers are. My staff does. So it's not for us. I mean, it's for the user or the fire department or the tower.
I would have thought the fire department would like to know, would like a big sign that tells you what hangar it is too, but apparently they know what
They like addresses for some reason. I don't know.
The other
They
thing-
memorize those things.
The other thing that's important is once you establish where those are, then the people who draw the charts, the taxi diagrams for the airport will mark those spots on the charts so that anybody who is unfamiliar has a chart and they can see that this particular spot, golf, for example, will take you to an area that's between these rows of hangars so that you can get the word out that way. So I think giving it some kind of an identification is important.
Okay. Well, we'll see what we can come up with.
My other question was just on the airfield safety projects. I think we were all thrilled to have the ILS in service 2 months ahead of time, but these other rather significant lighting components are now at least a month beyond their deadline, it seems. And I just was hoping we could maybe get some update on what's been going on. I realize a lot of that's probably out of your control, but perhaps Mr. Lincoln could share some of that.
That's the FAA's portion of the project. They apparently did not order, was it a transmitter, transponder?
Air-to-ground receiver.
And so now they have ordered that, and then once it comes in, their local people here will install it, and then it can be flight checked.
They won't flight check it without it. They try to get them to flight check it without it. So it has arrived. They're installing it, and they're scheduling the flight check. I just got a call yesterday from the manager who oversees the crews that do that.
Right. So they may hit this June 10th date. Oh, I'm sorry, no, late May, end of May.
We only have a week left.
It'll get flight checked in June.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I wanted to talk about the public meeting that we're having on June 3rd. Can we extend an invitation to all the signature tenants also? Because I know there's so much curiosity and so much buzz. It would be nice if they were invited along with the Atlantic Aviation tenants. I know it's open to the general public, but I think an extension from us would probably be really nice.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Will that meeting be noticed on the website?
Yes.
And maybe even a newsletter from the airport, maybe with the completion of the airfield improvements? Good time to talk about all of it and invite them to come to a meeting, and maybe a little advertising as to, hey, we could even tell them what the numbers are on the new hangars.
Don't go there.
I don't think that's going to be solved by June 3rd.
I'm not sure we'll get everybody in this room. Is this where you were going to host it?
Hopefully, it was to be in this room. We could also just switch the location to the tour center. That would accommodate perhaps more people. I'm not sure. But we can use smaller chairs and probably have more folks in.
Great. Well, I would like to thank both Hazel and Karen for all of their hard work on the T-hanger moving project. I know they both spent a lot of time on it, and I'd like to thank them and everybody else involved.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else, or do I? Go
I
ahead.
have one more thing to mention. Last week, Tracy and I went to the FAA conference put on by the Western Pacific Region in Los Angeles, and our airport was awarded an award, Airport of the Year, and it was based on our, I should get that. I don't have the plaque. Is it? Oh. Based on the airfield safety projects and our diligence and in following that project through and completing
Outstanding
it.
Airport of the Year.
Was it?
Congratulations.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
Our thanks to you and staff for all their good work.
yeah, so it's pretty
Very
exciting.
pleased. And I think that's another thing we should put in our newsletter is point that out and point out some of the things that have been completed and ahead of schedule so that we make sure they know the good press.
Yeah, we're going to put also a press release out about that next week.
I'd like to have that on the agenda for the public meeting, too.
Okay?
That would be nice.
And here is the plaque which says...
It's a gorgeous plaque.
Outstanding Airport, yeah, this is very
Oh,
fancy for the
that's
FAA. Outstanding Airport Award presented to me, Santa Barbara Municipal Airport, in recognition of outstanding leadership resulting in the successful resolution of significant challenges leading to the successful improvement of the runway safety area. And then it's signed by the regional administrator and the manager of the Western Pacific Region Airports Division.
I'd love to see that actually over at the terminal inside, maybe a glass case so people get to know a little bit about our airport and what's being done on their behalf as well as ours.
Yeah. So that was the prettiest plaque that was given out.
Great. Congratulations.
Well, back to your, one item on your director's report, the communications program. As you mentioned, you participate in the Goleta Valley Chamber of Commerce in the Goleta Valley Goleta Finest Awards. And Karen, Commissioner Khan, and myself had the opportunity to go to that. And I have to say, we met a lot of people who are big fans of the airport, including some of the educators from Isla Vista School and a lot of local people who really think you're doing a great job.
Great.
Great.
Thanks.
All right.
Also, we have tickets. We're one of the sponsors of the Goleta State of the City event next week on the 29th. So if any of you are available, it's from noon to 2 on the 29th, and would like to attend, we'll have tickets.
Sure. Where is it?
At the Holiday Inn.
Okay.
So let me know as soon as you can check your schedules.
I would be interested. Anybody else?
I'll be here.
Okay.
And
Mr.
Bill?
Gilbert was interested.
Okay. You were interested, right? Good. Commissioner Miller? Or?
I may be. I think
Check
you
your
did send
schedule.
us an email. I'll
Okay.
confirm that.
Okay.
Great. Do we have anything else? If not, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Ready to adjourn?
It's been moved. We're adjourned.